My online boyfriend is a bit of a weirdo. He constantly sends me pictures of his pet snake, always asking me if I think the little guy is handsome. I honestly am not a huge fan of reptiles, but my virtual boyfriend is a god at video games, and is incredibly generous with his wallet. So, I routinely swallow my conscience and shower the reptile with praise. Absolutely gorgeous. That is literally the most handsome snake I have ever seen in my entire life. He would always text back, "Does my baby like him?" I would reply in seconds, "I love him so much." Fully satisfied, the man on the other end of the screen would casually wire me $5,000. Eventually, I wanted to meet up in real life, but when I arrived at our agreed location, the only thing waiting for me was that little black snake. It was incredibly easy to recognize the little black snake. After all, Asher sent me pictures of him every single day. This is his front, this is his back. I practically had the reptile's anatomy memorized. So, even though the little black snake had been meticulously groomed today, wearing a miniature top hat and a tiny silk bow tie, I recognized him instantly. The strange part was that Asher was nowhere to be found. Maybe he just stepped out to take a call or grab something from a store. I thought about standing a bit further away to wait, but the moment the little snake locked his emerald green slit pupils on me, his eyes lit up with an unnatural brightness. He genuinely seemed thrilled to see me. I was still a little creeped out, but then I remembered this was the beloved pet of my stupidly rich, overly generous internet boyfriend. I had to put on the performance of a lifetime. Bracing myself, I sat down next to him. The light in the little snake's eyes grew even brighter. Swallowing the urge to scream, I put on my best gentle, maternal smile. I even reached out and lightly teased his chin. "You are so cute." The little snake actually seemed to understand me. A faint, rosy flush miraculously appeared on his dark, scaly face. Testing the waters, I added, "You look even better in person than in your photos." The snake was over the moon. He even lifted his tail tip to wave at me. Fighting down my primal human fear of cold-blooded creatures, I did my absolute best to interact with the little guy. I was determined to make sure that when Asher finally came back, he would see me radiating pure, maternal love. And then, hopefully, he would wire me another $5,000. But I kept up the act from noon until nightfall. Sitting in that high-end luxury restaurant, I drank 3 artisan lemonades, ate a plate of truffle pasta, 2 salads, and 3 different cuts of steak. I texted Asher 10 different times. No reply. No Asher. It wasn't until midnight that the waiter finally approached my table. "Miss Sophie, we are preparing to close for the night." Was this Asher playing some kind of sick joke on me? Feeling utterly humiliated, I reached for my purse to pay the massive bill. The waiter just smiled warmly and shook his head. The future boss's wife never has to pay for her meals. The staff even brought out a mountain of beautifully wrapped gift bags that Asher had prepared for me in advance. It suddenly clicked. Asher didn't show up because this was a test. Billionaires love doing this kind of thing. He wanted to observe me from the shadows to see if I was emotionally stable, if I had good manners, and if I possessed a genuinely loving heart. Normally, I possess none of those things. But remembering the sheer size of Asher's bank account, I was suddenly overflowing with the noblest virtues known to mankind. If this was a test, I was going to pass it with flying colors. So, when I gathered my things to leave, I absolutely refused to leave the snake behind. Stealing my nerves, I scooped the little guy up, tucked him against my chest, and carried him all the way home. "You can do this, Sophie. You are going to secure the bag." The little snake probably wasn't used to human body heat. Tucked against my chest, he got totally dizzy and looked a bit out of it. I scrambled to find a clean cardboard box and gently placed him inside. He finally snapped out of his daze, but for some reason, he looked completely crestfallen. I couldn't let his beloved pet die on my watch. I immediately went online, hunted down the contact info for a premium exotic pet store owner, and paid an absolute premium to have a luxury, temperature-controlled terrarium delivered and set up in my apartment that very night. I carefully placed the little snake inside. Looking at him, a funny thought crossed my mind. He looked exactly like a billionaire CEO waking up in his 1,000-square-foot California king bed. I snapped a picture and sent it to my MIA boyfriend. Still no response. Considering he had already spent roughly $500,000 on me over the course of our relationship, I decided to be patient. I went to take a shower. The moment he saw my bare shoulders and legs, he frantically turned his little head away, visibly flustered. "Oh my, what a perfect gentleman of a reptile. Now, let me see if you are a boy or a girl." It felt a little intrusive, but curiosity got the better of me. Ignoring the snake's frantic squirming, I gently but firmly held him down and inspected his underside. Wow, he was a male, and a surprisingly well-endowed one at that. I couldn't help but let out a cheeky wolf whistle. The little snake struggled so hard his top hat popped off and his bow tie went crooked. He finally scrambled into the far corner of the tank, staring at me with a look of absolute, violated betrayal. I cooed at him, offered a few words of comfort, and happily went to bed. Of course, I didn't actually go to sleep. You have to stay up late to truly appreciate the value of your free time. Around 2 in the morning, my phone finally buzzed with a message from Asher. "Baby, I honestly never expected you to be so passionate and bold." I knew it. My brilliant performance at the restaurant paid off. I happily texted back, "Do you like it?" The chat went completely silent. I started overthinking. Did he see how much food I inhaled? Was he judging me? Did you think I ate too much? I typed the words out, then quickly deleted them. Never incriminate yourself. Make him bring it up first. If he mentioned it, I would just lie and say I starved myself for 3 days so I could fit into my prettiest dress for our date. But then Asher's reply finally came through. "I love it. So, are you satisfied?" Of course I was satisfied. Asher had showered me with designer jewelry, luxury bags, and endless attention. I was living the absolute dream. I thought exactly that, so I said exactly that. Asher sent back a blushing emoji. Then he typed, "Baby, you are so honest. I love you so much. I promise I will make you the happiest woman in the world." Right on cue, a notification popped up. A $5,000 transfer with the note voluntary gift. Just another casual day making 5 grand from my couch. I punched the air under my blankets, absolutely thrilled. This was amazing. The money I had saved up from him was already enough to buy a Porsche Cayenne and put a down payment on a luxury penthouse. Asher sent another photo of the snake. He made it home. In the picture, the little snake was wearing his hat and bow tie, coiled up perfectly on a velvet cushion. The background was Asher's staggering, modern glass mansion. Wait a minute, the snake was just here. I threw off the covers and ran to the living room. The terrarium was empty. The little escape artist had actually broken out. He snuck out and managed to navigate his way back to a billionaire's mansion all by himself. What an absolute genius of a pet. I happily texted Asher back, "Baby, this photo is stunning. Out of all the pictures you've ever sent me, this is the most handsome he has ever looked." Asher was delighted. I always trust my baby's taste. A second later, that exact photo became Asher's profile picture. He even sent me a second cash transfer for the night. Alright, up to 10 grand for the day. I happily accepted the money and typed, "I can't wait for our next date." After all, one date with this man earned me more than half a year's salary. After days of relentless begging on my end, Asher finally agreed to a second date. I went all out. I wore my most elegant, figure-hugging dress, colored contacts, expensive false lashes, flawless contouring. I showed up to the cafe looking like a supermodel, but sitting at our reserved table, all I found was his pet snake. His outfit was even more elaborate this time. The little guy was wearing a custom-tailored miniature suit jacket and balancing a tiny pair of gold-rimmed glasses on his snout. Was he cosplaying as a bespectacled intellectual? No, wait, that wasn't the point. Where the hell was Asher? I finally realized something was deeply wrong. Was he really standing me up again? Just as the frustration began to boil over, I felt a soft pressure against my palm. I looked down and saw the very tip of the snake's tail. Tied neatly around the tail was a beautiful little ribbon, tied into a perfect bow. He looked exactly like a meticulously wrapped gift, impossible to reject. The little snake looked up at me with eyes full of pure, unadulterated sincerity. The moment I smiled, the entire snake slithered happily into my open hands. "Oh, you sweet little thing." I finally understood. Asher wasn't just looking for a girlfriend. He was looking for a stepmother for his precious pet. I had a great personality, and I had proven my high tolerance for reptiles, so Asher chose me. He didn't show up because he wanted the snake to personally vet me. He was letting his pet choose his new mom. Asher really loved this animal. Well, if my job was to pamper the snake, I was going to be the best snake mom in the world. I dutifully straightened his tiny suit jacket, then carried him around the city. We walked through the botanical gardens and even caught a movie. I wanted to make conversation, but then I realized Asher had never actually told me the snake's name. Without a name, I decided to just call him Baby. "Baby, do you like this park?" The little snake nodded. "Baby, do you want to go look at the pond?" He nodded again, perfectly obedient. "Baby, do you want to come home with me?" The snake hesitated, but the hesitation lasted exactly 3 seconds before he started nodding so hard his glasses nearly flew off. Winning over the pet was basically winning over the billionaire. I was floating on cloud 9. I leaned down and pressed a kiss to the top of his scaly head. The little snake blushed a deep crimson and buried his face into my chest, making soft, happy little squeaks. Honestly, putting Asher's massive bank account aside for a moment, this little snake was incredibly cute, surprisingly handsome, wildly intelligent, and never tried to bite me. Spending the rest of my life taking care of him with Asher didn't sound like a bad deal at all. 5. The snake rested perfectly still in my arms as I carried him back to my apartment. My phone remained completely silent. Asher was probably tied up with corporate billionaire stuff. So, I sat on the couch with the snake and watched sports highlights until late. When it was over, I tucked him back into his luxury terrarium. Middle of the night. I was deep in sleep when a soft rustling sound near my ear woke me up. I groggily opened my eyes. The little snake had somehow crawled under my duvet and was sleeping soundly, curled up right against my chest with a look of absolute bliss. I gently poked him, his tail tip wrapped securely around my finger, like a child begging for affection. But as a responsible pet owner, I had to be safe. I grabbed my phone and searched online. Is it safe to sleep in the same bed as a pet snake? The internet firmly replied, absolutely never sleep in the same bed as a snake. I had to ignore his pleading, watery eyes. I picked him up by the middle and carried him back to the glass tank. He tried to wrap himself around my wrist, refusing to let go, but I gently detached him. Good babies have to learn how to sleep in their own beds. The little snake froze. Then, with the saddest expression I had ever seen on any living creature, he slowly lowered his head. He climbed into the terrarium by himself. Halfway inside, he turned around. Looked at me. Looked at my bed. Looked back at me. Then dramatically flopped onto his little velvet cushion like a man whose heart had just been shattered. I almost apologized to a snake. The next morning, I woke up to 3 messages from Asher. Baby. Did he behave? I smiled proudly. Of course. He even tried to sleep with me, but don't worry. I checked online and put him back in his tank. Healthy boundaries are important for children. The typing bubble appeared. Stopped. Appeared again. Stopped. Finally. You put him back? What a strange question. Obviously. Another long silence. Then. Good girl. Transfer received, $20,000. 20,000? Healthy parenting apparently paid even better than snake babysitting. I immediately replied. Anything for our baby. The typing bubble appeared so violently it looked like Asher was smashing his keyboard. Finally. You're perfect. My heart skipped. The money skipped harder. Over the next month, our relationship settled into a bizarre routine. Every weekend. The snake. Never Asher. The little guy showed up wearing increasingly ridiculous outfits. A tiny tuxedo. A tiny raincoat. A tiny Christmas sweater. One time. A miniature Rolex. That watch probably cost more than my apartment. I refused to ask questions. Instead, I treated baby like royalty. I brushed his scales with a tiny soft toothbrush. Bought him imported quail eggs. Read children's books aloud because Google claimed snakes enjoyed familiar voices. I even ordered him a custom memory foam snake bed. Every time I sent Asher a picture, money appeared. $8,000. $12,000. $30,000. At this point I wasn't dating a billionaire. I was employed by a reptile. Then, everything changed. One evening my phone rang. Not a text. An actual phone call. Unknown number. I answered. Hello? A man's voice. Low. Smooth. Ridiculously attractive. I wanted to thank you. I blinked. Asher? A small laugh. So you do remember my name. My stomach flipped. Finally. After nearly a year. I was hearing his voice. I've wanted to meet you for a long time. I nearly fell off my couch. You've wanted to? Yes. Then why do you keep sending your snake instead? Silence. Because that was me. I laughed. Oh, that's funny. No. Ha ha ha. No. You're serious? I've never lied to you. I slowly looked toward the terrarium. Baby was inside. Curled up. Watching me. The little idiot. Actually looked nervous. No. I whispered. No, no, no. You mean? The snake. Is you? Most of the time. My brain blue screened. You. The. What? He sighed. I suppose I should explain. I'm not actually a snake. Oh, thank God. I'm a man. I knew that. Who occasionally becomes a snake. That was somehow worse. I have a hereditary condition. A condition? My family has carried it for centuries. You. Turn into snakes? Only around the person we're destined to marry. My soul left my body. The first time I saw your picture online. I transformed. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you. I remembered. Every picture. Every compliment. Every kiss. Every time I'd rubbed under his chin. Every time I'd called him a handsome little baby. Then I remembered something else. Something much worse. My face drained of every drop of blood. Asher. Yes? When? I checked. Whether you were a boy. Silence. Long. Painful. Unbearable. Finally. In the quietest voice imaginable. I remember. I wanted the earth to open and swallow me whole. I am so sorry. You whistled. I didn't know you were a person. You said I was. He coughed awkwardly. Surprisingly well endowed. I screamed into a pillow. From the phone. Very softly. Came the sound of a man trying, and completely failing, not to laugh. I buried my face in the pillow. Please. Forget it ever happened. I can't. His voice was suspiciously cheerful now. It was a very memorable experience. I committed accidental harassment. You committed accidental veterinary misconduct. That is not better. A quiet chuckle came through the phone. It was warm. Soft. Dangerously attractive. It was the first time I'd ever heard Asher genuinely laugh. I've wanted to laugh like this for a long time. The embarrassment faded just enough for curiosity to win. So. What do you actually look like? The line went quiet. I could show you. Really? If you're still willing to meet me. I looked toward the terrarium. Baby, no. Asher had somehow managed to hide his face underneath his tiny velvet blanket. I think. I said carefully. I owe you an apology in person. The following afternoon, Asher finally gave me an address. Not a cafe. Not a restaurant. His home. A pair of massive wrought iron gates slowly swung open as my taxi approached. Beyond them stretched an enormous estate. Fountains. Gardens. A lake. Even the driveway looked expensive. I whispered to myself. Rich people really do live in another universe. A butler greeted me before I even reached the front steps. Miss Sophie. We've been expecting you. Inside. Everything sparkled. Crystal chandeliers. Marble floors. Paintings that probably belonged in museums. I was busy pretending I wasn't impressed when I heard footsteps. Slow. Steady. I turned around. For a moment. Neither of us spoke. He was tall. Dark hair. Sharp green eyes that looked exactly like the snake's. Even the way he tilted his head was familiar. I pointed a shaking finger. You have the same eyes. He smiled. So I've been told. Then, before I could stop myself, I blurted out. You actually are ridiculously handsome. He laughed. I'm relieved. Why? I've spent a year asking your opinion. Wait. Every single picture. Every message. Do you think he's handsome? He hadn't been asking about his pet. He'd been asking about himself. I covered my face. Oh, no. You thought I was narcissistic? I thought you were an obsessed snake dad. I suppose both were partially true. The butlers standing nearby all looked straight ahead with flawless professionalism. Not one of them reacted. But I could see one elderly butler's shoulders trembling ever so slightly. He was absolutely trying not to laugh. Asher noticed. Edgar. Yes, sir? You may laugh. The old butler immediately bent over, laughing so hard he had to grab a nearby table for support. I'm terribly sorry, sir, but watching Miss Sophie compliment your scales every day has been the highlight of the staff's year. I slowly turned toward Asher. The staff knew? He rubbed the back of his neck. Everyone knew. The chefs? Yes. The drivers? Yes. The gardeners? Yes. The security guards? Also yes. I stared at him in disbelief. So. I've been passionately flirting with a snake. In front of your entire household? Asher looked genuinely apologetic. When you put it that way. I let out a dramatic groan. I'm never recovering from this. Before he could answer, there was a blur of black. In an instant, the tiny snake was back, perched comfortably around Asher's shoulders with his miniature top hat slightly crooked. Asher sighed. It happens automatically when I get too emotional. The little snake looked at me, lifted the tip of his tail, and gave me the exact same shy little wave that had made me fall for the world's strangest pet. I couldn't help smiling. You know, I still think you're the most handsome snake I've ever met. The tiny snake hid behind Asher's collar, visibly flustered. Asher, meanwhile, smiled with the exact same expression. It finally clicked. Whether he was a man or a snake, his reactions had always been exactly the same. Asher stayed frozen. One hand rubbed the back of his neck. The other instinctively reached up to adjust the tiny top hat that was somehow still balanced on his snake form. Thank you. I grinned. You know, it's actually less weird now. Less weird? Yeah. I spent an entire year thinking you were an exceptionally intelligent reptile. Turns out you're just an exceptionally awkward billionaire. I'll take that. We had barely sat down for tea when an older man in an immaculate suit entered the room. Silver hair. Perfect posture. An expression carved out of granite. Asher. Grandfather. Oh. The air pressure in the room dropped. The old man looked at me. Then at the tiny snake curled around Asher's shoulders. Then back at me. So. You're the young woman. I stood up so quickly I nearly knocked over the teacup. Hello, sir. He nodded politely. Then asked the most terrifying question imaginable. How did my grandson win your heart? I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. How was I supposed to answer that? Because he paid me? No. Because I thought he owned the cutest snake alive? Also no. Asher quietly sipped his tea, clearly refusing to save me. Traitor. Finally, I answered honestly. I thought he loved something so much that he wanted to share it with me every day. The old man's eyebrows lifted. So I thought. If someone could care that deeply for one little life, he probably had a good heart. Silence. The old man slowly turned toward Asher. You didn't tell her. I wanted her to like me before she knew. Grandfather looked back at me. You know he transferred over $2 million to you. I blinked. What? Asher slowly looked down into his teacup. Approximately. Approximately? I stopped counting. I did not. I whipped out my banking app with trembling fingers. One by one, I scrolled through the endless list of voluntary gift. 5,000. 10,000. 20,000. 30,000. 50,000. Luxury shopping. Travel. Jewelry. Restaurant reservations. Somehow. The total sat just over $2.3 million. My vision blurred. I thought it was, maybe. 600,000. Grandfather finally smiled. It was small. But genuine. My grandson has never understood moderation. Asher quietly muttered. I was happy. Grandfather sighed. When he likes someone, he becomes unreasonable. I noticed. Later that evening, after grandfather left, I found Asher standing alone in the garden. Moonlight reflected off the koi pond. He wasn't a snake. Just a surprisingly normal-looking man. I have a question. He nodded. Anything. Why didn't you tell me sooner? He was quiet for a long time. When people discover what my family is, most of them leave. So. I wanted one person. Who loved me before they knew. I looked at him. Then burst out laughing. He blinked. Why are you laughing? Because you're an idiot. You literally transformed into a snake. Yes. You let me carry you around in a handbag. Yes. You let me read bedtime stories to you. You tucked me in very gently. You let me call you baby. His ears turned bright red. Yes. You even let me straighten your tiny glasses. They kept slipping. I couldn't stop laughing. Tears streamed down my face. You were trying to make sure I loved you. And somehow you accidentally became the world's most spoiled pet. For the first time in years, Asher laughed so hard he doubled over. Halfway through laughing. Poof. A familiar little black snake landed on the grass with an indignant squeak. His tiny top hat popped off. I picked it up, dusted it off, and gently placed it back on his head. There. Much better. The little snake looked up at me with those familiar emerald eyes. Then climbed into my hands without hesitation. I smiled. You know, I don't think of you as a pet anymore. The tiny snake tilted his head. I think of you as my very strange boyfriend. He immediately buried his face against my wrist, his tail curling into a perfect little heart. From somewhere inside the mansion, the staff watching through the windows erupted into applause. Asher, still a snake, looked utterly mortified. I laughed. Get used to it, baby. We're going to have a very weird marriage. The engagement happened 3 weeks later. Not because Asher planned some grand romantic surprise. Because he panicked. It started with one sentence. I was scrolling through my phone when I casually said, "Oh, my aunt wants to introduce me to the son of one of her friends." The newspaper Asher was pretending to read slowly lowered. What? I already told her I have a boyfriend. Good. But she doesn't believe online relationships are real. So she said if she doesn't meet you soon, she'll arrange a blind date anyway. Silence. Complete silence. I looked up. Asher? He was gone. Asher? A tiny black snake shot across the living room floor at approximately 90 miles an hour. He ricocheted off the sofa. Bounced off a coffee table. Accidentally knocked over a vase. The butler calmly caught it before it hit the floor. Thank you, Edgar. You're welcome, sir. The snake shot toward the front door. I blinked. Where's he going? Edgar checked his watch. If history repeats itself. Sir is about to make several emotionally compromised financial decisions. What? Exactly 43 minutes later. The front gates opened. Truck after truck rolled inside. Florists. Jewelry stores. Luxury car dealerships. Interior designers. Even a construction company. I stood in the driveway, completely confused. Asher? The little snake slithered up my leg, transformed halfway up, and suddenly I was face to face with a very flustered billionaire. He was slightly out of breath. Hair messy. Tie crooked. He thrust a velvet ring box into my hands. Marry me. You forgot to get on one knee. Oh. He immediately dropped onto one knee. The force was so dramatic I heard Edgar whisper to another butler. I believe Sir bruised it. Asher ignored him. Sophie. I know our relationship started in the strangest way imaginable. I accidentally introduced myself as my own pet. You accidentally inspected my anatomy. We've both made mistakes. The entire staff nodded solemnly. I covered my face. Must you keep bringing that up? I'll never bring it up again. Good. After today. Asher. He smiled nervously. I love how kind you are when nobody's watching. I love that you treated me gently even when you believed I was just an ordinary snake. I love that every compliment you gave me was completely sincere. He opened the ring box. Inside sat a diamond so enormous I instinctively looked around for security guards. There they are, Edgar said helpfully. I turned. There were 8. 8 security guards. I hadn't even noticed them. I don't need you to love my money. I don't need you to love my mansion. I just. His voice softened. Want you to keep calling me handsome. I burst into laughter. Actual tears rolled down my cheeks. You proposed. Because my aunt tried to set me up on a blind date? He looked away. Maybe. You bought an engagement ring in under an hour? Maybe. You mobilized half the luxury retail industry? Possibly. I slipped the ring onto my finger. You're completely insane. His face fell. Is that a no? I stepped forward. Took both of his hands. Then kissed him. When we finally pulled apart, I smiled. It's a yes. Before anyone could cheer. Poof. Asher turned back into the little black snake. The tiny engagement ring he'd apparently had custom made for his snake form somehow appeared around the middle of his little top hat. Edgar sighed. I told the jeweler to prepare both sizes. I stared. There's a snake engagement ring? Edgar smiled proudly. Sir insisted. I picked Asher up. The tiny snake wrapped happily around my wrist. I kissed the top of his head. My fiancé. He squeaked happily. From behind us came thunderous applause. The gardeners had joined. The chefs had come outside. Even the accountants were clapping from the second-floor windows. One elderly maid dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief. I've worked here for 40 years, she sniffled. I've never seen young master smile this much. Asher, still a snake, hid his face against my sleeve in embarrassment. I laughed. There he goes. My handsome little snake. His tail wagged so hard that his tiny top hat spun sideways, and the entire estate erupted into laughter. 5 years later. People on the internet still argued about one mystery. Who exactly was billionaire CEO Asher Hawthorne's wife? There were blurry paparazzi photos. A hand holding his. The back of a woman's head. A silhouette on a yacht. Nobody ever got a clear picture. Asher protected my privacy with the same determination he'd once used to send me daily snake selfies. As for me, I retired at 29. Not because Asher asked me to. Because I wanted to. Instead, I spent my days doing whatever made me happy. Reading. Traveling. Trying new recipes. Spoiling one ridiculously dramatic husband. Every now and then, I'd walk into his office carrying lunch. If he'd been buried in meetings for too long. Poof. There would suddenly be a tiny black snake in an expensive suit sleeping across his keyboard. His executives wouldn't even react anymore. One would calmly say, "I believe the CEO has exceeded his stress limit." Another would answer, "Delay the merger discussion by 30 minutes. Someone would quietly dim the lights. I'd pick him up. "Come on, baby." The little snake would instantly wrap around my wrist with a content little squeak. The executives would all smile. The boss's wife is here. Crisis resolved. Our home slowly filled with framed photographs. Vacation pictures. Wedding pictures. Family pictures. And hundreds upon hundreds of snake pictures. Every outfit he'd ever worn. The tiny tuxedo. The raincoat. The Christmas sweater. The little glasses. Even the crooked top hat from our second date. Guests always asked the same question. "Why do you have so many pictures of your husband's pet?" I would simply smile. "Oh. That's my husband." They would laugh. I would laugh too. It was easier than explaining. One rainy afternoon, I found an old phone while cleaning a closet. It still had all of our first messages. I smiled as I scrolled. "Do you think the little guy is handsome? He's the most handsome snake in the world. Does my baby like him? I love him so much." I laughed until tears formed. Behind me, I heard footsteps. Asher wrapped his arms around my waist. "What are you looking at?" "Our first chats." He rested his chin on my shoulder. I was so nervous every time I pressed send. "You hid behind snake pictures." "I did. You know." I nudged him playfully. I wasn't lying. He blinked. "About what?" "I really did think you were the most handsome snake I'd ever seen." He laughed so hard. Poof. The little black snake landed on the floor with his tiny top hat falling over one eye. I picked him up automatically. Some habits never disappeared. He curled happily into my hands. I scratched gently under his chin. His eyes closed in pure bliss. Still handsome. His tail gave one happy little wag. I smiled. "You know what?" "What?" "If you had told me on the first day that I'd marry a man who occasionally turned into a snake, I would have run away." "I know. But if you asked me now." I kissed the top of his tiny head. "I'd still choose you. Every single time." The little snake looked up at me with the exact same emerald eyes that had first stared at me outside that restaurant years ago. Only now, I finally knew whose eyes they were. He nuzzled my cheek. I laughed. He squeaked. Outside, rain tapped gently against the windows. Inside, our home was warm. Strange. A little ridiculous. And filled with more love than either of us had ever imagined possible. After all, the most handsome snake in the world had always been my husband.